Hello everyone, this is Diamond More Than 5 bringing you some Regulation H tournament battles in the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet VGC format. These upcoming regulation will be used for locals and regional tournament gameplay. However, the latter will be using Regulation J, which includes mythicals in the format. So the only real way to get practice for tournaments is to play with friends, play on online simulators, or to play in these Limitless best of 3 open team sheet tournaments, which I personally believe is the best way to prepare for regionals. You get decent opponents at minimum, great opponents at best, and really good familiarity with the game. So Regulation H, no big legendaries, so I'm able to use stuff like King Gambit to run away with the game. They give me a Defiant boost at the beginning of the game. We just go straight for a Protect, anticipating a Will-O-Wisp to come into that slot, which it does, and set up an Aurora Veil, just trying to play a little bit of a slower game, mitigate some of this damage. They do go for a Hyper Voice on their Farigiraf, just going straight for some damage to activate that Throat Spray. The Farigiraf is boosted. I thought that they might be trying to set up Trick Room, which was another good reason to protect King Gambit, as I am slower than my opponent's Pokemon. I do switch Ninetales into Rillaboom this turn, knowing that it's not extremely threatened without leaving King Gambit open. They can only Will-O-Wisp one of my Pokemon this turn, and they do Will-O-Wisp the King Gambit with its boosted attack. It can get scary. I do, however, go for a Kowtow Cleave into their Farigiraf. They go for a Hyper Voice, which I take better with the Aurora Veil up and my Assault Vest on Rillaboom. Not too much serious damage, and notably I put the Farigiraf in range of a U-turn, which puts on a lot of pressure this turn. The only way they can stop that is to protect Farigiraf and burn my Rillaboom. So in order to keep my momentum up, I U-turn into the Incineroar slot as Dragonite comes in onto that slot, and Farigiraf does protect, not wanting to be knocked out to the U-turn. However, I did not fall for the bait. However, I did keep the slot honest by attacking into it with my King Gambit. I U-turn out into Ninetales so that I can threaten big damage onto the Dragonite. However, in hindsight, Kommo-o might have been a little bit better there, because I know that they're going to Terra here, and without the fighting damage coverage on Kommo-o, I don't have a lot of threat against a Terra Steel Dragonite on this board. However, I don't think it's too bad because Farigiraf isn't contributing much. They recognize that. They get Farigiraf out of there, bringing in Incineroar, giving me another attack boost on my King Gambit, bringing me up to neutral because the burn halves your attack. But now I'm at +2 stages of attack on my King Gambit. They do go for the Terastallization. I do force that Terastallization by clicking Blizzard here, but I also doubled into it with Kowtow Cleave. However, they take away my stat boosts with Haze, and also give themselves a ground, or they ground themselves by using Terastallization to turn into a Steel type, so they do get the benefits of the grassy terrain. So now this board not having Kommo-o in, I really don't have a great way to threaten my opponent. I decide just to go for some chip damage into Incineroar and chip down the Dragonite as well with Kowtow Cleave. However, my opponent makes a great play, going for a Tailwind after my Moonblast goes off, because Dragonite is not Prankster boosted and Ninetales is faster, and then being able to Parting Shot my Ninetales afterward, and bring in their Blood Moon Ursaluna with a fresh set of Tailwind. And now things are looking really scary for me. This Ursaluna can dish out massive damage, threatens my whole team. I don't have a safe switch, and so I have to let something go down this turn. I recognize that and just click 2 moves, Blizzard and Kowtow Cleave, hoping to get some chip into the Ursaluna, weakening it for some of my Pokemon in the back. They go for Stomping Tantrum into my King Gambit for some super effective damage, and they Blood Moon with the Life Orb. They're able to take out my Ninetales. My Aurora Veil is gone. Nothing is saving me. And I go for the Kowtow Cleave. Again, chipping it down, getting it ready for my Pokemon in the back. We all restore some health. However, again, not looking great position. I have to wait out their Tailwind. Excuse me. I bring in my Rillaboom. And in the threat of Fake Out, they do decide to go for Protect. However, I know they couldn't go for another Blood Moon here, and maybe underestimating the amount of damage this Dragonite was going to be able to do to my Rillaboom with 5 hits of Scale Shot. They take me down to 11 HP. Anything will knock me out from this range. However, I did go for Wood Hammer into the Ursaluna, and then a Kowtow Cleave into the Dragonite, which, with its lowered defenses, the Kowtow Cleave is able to take it out from this range. My opponent only has Farigiraf and Incineroar in the back. Both have taken a little bit of damage. And so I'm hoping that I might be able to clean this up. I do have Grassy Glide, but the Farigiraf blocks priority. This is the last turn of Tailwind, so I decide to protect my Kingambit, let my Rillaboom go down so I can bring my Kommo-o in. The only thing I'm worried about is that they might set up Trick Room this turn, and with my burned Kingambit that isn't boosted, they might just be able to take out my Kommo-o and Trick Room. However, they do not set up Trick Room. They go straight for the Hyper Voice, so I'm still in the game. I think they're in range of a Aura Sphere at this point on the Ursaluna. Ursaluna Blood Moon does not have great special defense. So I make a bold call and I go for Aura Sphere into the Farigiraf, expecting a Protect on the Ursaluna and to switch into Incineroar. So I doubled the Farigiraf slot. However, they call my bluff, or they think their Ursaluna will hold on. And I don't even terrestrialize my Kommo-o because I'm so confident in this read that I take a huge amount of damage from Psychic Noise. I don't get the Grassy Terrain recovery. And at this point, I'm resigned to forfeit the game. However, I'm like, well, my opponent can still throw. So we'll give them the opportunity to throw. I just go for the Aura Sphere. They go for a Protect into Farigiraf. So a win is still on the table if I play my cards right. However, I don't think I'm in the correct mental state at this point in the game. You saw that last turn I did go for, hover the forfeit button. I'm just like, well, they do have many paths to a guaranteed victory, or they have at least one path to a guaranteed victory, and that is Fake Out on this turn and Trick Room. And as such, I didn't even go for a Protect, which in hindsight, I should have gone for the Protect. The Incineroar's only attacking move is Knockoff. If I went for a Protect there, they went for Psychic Noise instead of Trick Room. They were in range of a Clanging Scales, which would then boost my attack and then knock out Incineroar with Aura Sphere. So I'm a little bit tilted from that, and I'm like, oh, my opponent played a great game. They got their Ursaluna in, but a very questionable end game in my opinion. Going into Game 2, they do make the same lead, winning Game 1 with it. I don't expect them to switch it up, but I do switch it up a little bit. I lead my Ninetales and Kommo-o. Now, I do this as a little bit of a bait. I have Covert Cloak on my Ninetales, so I know they can't Fake Out that slot, and I know they can't do anything meaningful to Kommo-o, so because I don't want them to allow me to set up for free, I swap in my Kingambit here, hoping to take a parting shot from that Incineroar, because I believe their play here with my faster Pokemon is to parting shot Protect. However, they don't fall for that bait. They go for a Knockoff into my Ninetales, removing my Covert Cloak, allowing their Incineroar to fake me out in the future. Again, a bit of a slower game. And they do set up Trick Room. However, my Kingambit is the slowest thing on the field. I go for a Kowtow Cleave, forcing that Farigiraf to terrestrialize into Fairy, so that a Dragonite, which gave me so much problems last time, or a Ursaluna with normal doesn't sweep me. So I go for the Kowtow Cleave, knowing full well if they go for a Fairy Terra, that's good for me. They do go for the Fairy Terra. to not get knocked out, and they do burn my King Gambit. I'm not boosted this time because I brought in my King Gambit after the Incineroar's Intimidate. And I go for the Blizzard. Again, if the Incineroar decides to Parting Shot out into an Ursaluna to start sweeping me, I wanted to punish that switch in with that Blizzard damage, and I get rewarded even harder for the Blizzard, and I get the freeze on the Farigiraf. They do not thaw out. I get Iron Head damage, putting it on low HP. They do Parting Shot my Ninetales this turn, trying to make most effective use of their Trick Room. Incineroar wasn't doing much in there with just Will-O-Wisp and Knockoff into these Pokemon that have been whisked and knocked off. And I do get that Blizzard, big punish into the Ursaluna with a critical hit from my lowered attack stage. It was enough to take both of those Pokemon out, putting me in an excellent position. Now there is effectively nothing that can stop my Kommo-o from winning the game. If I can remove that Dragonite, then even Terastallized, or a Terastallized Kommo-o wins the game, but they can't Terastallize their Dragonite. I know their only way back into this game is by knocking out my Ninetales, so I preserve it for when Trick Room ends. I switch out into my Rillaboom, and I'm just going to start trying to chip down the Dragonite. That's the only thing that can knock out my Ninetales, potentially. And I want to preserve a potential Aurora Veil or Hail in case things get dicey. They do go into that slot with Stomping Tantrum as their best way of hitting Ninetales. And now everyone restores a little bit of HP, and we take a little bit of burn, revealing some speed tiers, which we already know. The Aurora Veil does wear off. Twisted Dimensions do return to normal. I just go for a Fake Out into Incineroar. I go for a Stomping into my King Gambit. We know from previous battles that doesn't do too much damage. Incineroar flinches, and we get a Kowtow Cleave into the Dragonite. Again, just chipping it down, removing their win con. The game is effectively won at this point. They've used their Terastallization. I have Kommo-o in the back with Aura Sphere to knock out their Incineroar. Now the Dragonite is in range of Sucker Punch, so I do go for it, expecting the Tailwind here, but I'm not too worried about it because that makes their Incineroar outspeed my Rillaboom. They do knock off my Assault Vest, but that sets me up to activate the win condition. We U-turn into Dragonite. We bring in Ninetales. Again, this Incineroar does not have a fire move. It does not threaten my Ninetales. It only has Knockoff and Will-O-Wisp, so I can always just Sucker Punch and Blizzard the Dragonite here safely, and it will be knocked out. Grassy Terrain and Burns. You know the drill. So we do go for the Sucker Punch. It does fail as they go for Haze, not wanting to be knocked out to the Sucker Punch. But they do get knocked out by the following Blizzard. They get a Parting Shot off on it, you know, to do what they can to save that Ice Dragon type on 1 HP from this Blizzard. But yes, the game was much more in my control, and I did get fortunate to put it even further in my control, I would say. I don't think I was in a bad position, but obviously a Blizzard critical hit into a Blood Moon Ursaluna is brilliant. You know, it just is going to make the game easy for me. Now we do have guaranteed win conditions. I hard swap Ninetales into my Rillaboom. I'm just, you know, trying to wait out their Tailwind to get my Kommo-o in safely. Again, they can't knock it out anyway. They've only got Knockoff. So the burn on Rillaboom really doesn't matter. I'm just pivoting around my Pokemon to bring in Kommo-o and win the game at this point. However, I am taking mental notes that Incineroar out of position is kind of good into the team, you know, at least defensively. I don't have a lot of ways of hitting it if Kommo-o goes down, so I'm taking note in that for Game 3. You know, keep that in mind. For Game 3, I have Rillaboom, King Gambit, and Ninetales, all which struggle against this Incineroar. So, Incineroar Parting Shots my Rillaboom. I don't even bother going for fake out. I know the tailwind ends this turn. I just U-turn, bring in my Kommo-o safely, and chipping away with Kowtow Cleaves. So I switch out my King Gambit into my Rillaboom. Again, just going for the absolute guaranteed safe win condition. My opponent can forfeit at any point because it is over, but they are deciding to play it out, maybe get a little extra thinking time. I swap into Rillaboom, go for a Clangorous Soul. They can't knock off my Throat Spray now. Knockoff does nothing anyway. Their best bet is to burn my Kommo-o at this rate, so that is what they go for. Spoiler alert, I guess, the Throat Spray activation is taking longer. They do go for the Will-O-Wisp. They connect the burn there. But now, I set up that Clangorous Soul because I wasn't sure if the Aura Sphere would KO from that range, and I didn't want to give my opponent any information. That's another reason why they might not be forfeiting, is to get information about damage rolls and etc. I didn't want to reveal the spread on my Kommo-o at all, so I do go for the Clangorous Soul so that this is just going to knock out the Incineroar no matter what. I go for my Terastallization just to, rub it in my opponent's face at this point that I haven't used it. Maybe a little bit of bad manners from the critical hit Blizzard that I'm not going to say bailed me out because I think I was in a good position, but, threw that game into my favor immediately. So we're going into a game 3. Now remember, what I said last game. That Incineroar, I didn't have a lot of ways to deal with it, so I wanted to switch up something to help me better deal with Incineroar. However, I am really liking my Ninetales lead. Getting up my Aurora Veil early has been nice. They switch up their lead significantly. I switch up and bring Gastrodon this time to be able to hit Incineroar a little bit better. We are threatening a KO on that Dragonite. They Terastallize their Blood Moon Ursaluna to get, huge damage, leaving their Dragonite vulnerable to the Blizzard, not allowing them to set up Tailwind on this first turn. Very explosive first turn based on how the past 2 games have gone. And they go for a Blood Moon into Ninetales, not the Gastrodon. So I am able to get a big yawn off onto the Blood Moon Ursaluna. I think they were worried about not being able to KO my Gastrodon behind an Aurora Veil. So that's why they went for that play. Now I did miss a little bit of footage there. Let me pause for a second and explain what happened. I missed some footage in editing. They brought their Primarina in. I brought my Rillaboom in. They swapped to their Incineroar. I wood-hammered their Primarina, and they protected. So now they go for a fake out into my Rillaboom and an Icy Wind. Okay, we're caught up. Sorry about that. In editing, I realized my opponent had talked to me after the match and said they missed an Icy Wind, so I was looking back in editing where that Icy Wind miss was to see if it truly mattered, and I think that's where this footage got deleted. Back to the game. Okay, so Rillaboom speed drops, Gastrodon speed drops. What they're trying to do here is get a position for their Blood Moon Ursaluna to come in so that it's faster than my Pokemon. So what I'm trying to do is ensure that I still have enough threatening Pokemon to the Ursaluna. Now we've traded Ninetales, so we've got a 3-on-3. I've only got Kommo-o in the back, but I don't want Kommo-o to come in and get a speed drop because then the Ursaluna can threaten it in or out of Terra. If they call my Terra, things can get messy, so I'm trying to play the cleanest game that I can. Incineroar goes for a knockoff into my Gastrodon. I'm playing just as healthy as I can. Again, they're just spamming Icy Wind. This is the double Icy Wind miss that happened, which, I still U-turned with my Rillaboom here. Gastrodon is at minus a million speed. Kommo-o gets to come in here. Earth Power takes out Incineroar. That did not matter. That Icy Wind miss did not matter. I'm just going to say it. But that was the explanation for the jank footage, so to speak, earlier. So now my best course of action is to go for a Terastallized Aura Sphere into the Blood Moon Ursaluna. If they protect and try to Icy Wind me, then I have a switch into my Rillaboom. And I go for a Yawn into the Primarina this turn as well with my Gastrodon. They go for a Moonblast into my Gastrodon, expecting the Terastallization. The Aura Sphere takes it out. Again, I think they underestimated the damage that my Kommo-o was doing. I am more trained in my special attack. So, again, if they had Protect and Icy Winded there, I could protect my Gastrodon here, swap out into my Rillaboom while their Primarina falls asleep, and then fake out pressure, Yawn pressure, Muddy Water, etc. I have ways to beat the Kommo-o at that point, guaranteed. However, they took their best course of action by going for their Earth Power, presumably, into my predicted Kommo-o Terra. They do get a Hyper Voice off here as I protect Gastrodon to let them fall asleep, so I don't get a boosted special attack boost from my Storm Drain, but I do just set up a Clangorous Soul there. Now with Rillaboom in the back, I'm always going to win this game. My opponent recognizes that, and they do forfeit the battle. I win this first set of the tournament 2-1. Very fun set, very cool team from my opponent, and I think that my team played very well. Gastrodon coming in that Game 3, them leaving Incineroar on the bench in favor of Primarina, not using their Farigiraf-centric game plan. I thought it was a very interesting set, and we made the correct call. Gastrodon came in clutch in that endgame. Kommo-o showing that it is a threat to be dealt with in this format, and I hope you enjoyed these battles, and I plan on sharing all my tournament preparation in Regulation H. This is going to be my primary way of preparing for tournaments, so I hope you can enjoy preparing with me. I will leave links to teams as I feel they are appropriate. So look for my future battles and hope to see you next time.